trying to do. And with that, I'll submit to any questions. I do have legal representation here that represents the Department of Agriculture for any concerns that you may have within the department.
Thank you, Senator. It's a great overview of the bill, and I want to thank you, the Commissioner and his office, and all those that have met with us prior to the subcommittee meeting today. And I want to reiterate the goal here is to capture information testimony. Then I will make a report back to Chairman Cowsert for the full committee later this afternoon on what our recommendations and our findings are through that. One of the things that we did talk about, I just want to mention briefly, is today is hemp as identified as 0.3 in the code. I have learned that there's some discussion at the federal level of changing that to 1%, which is a significant increase of 3x plus. So I want to find a way, I believe, to make a good recommendation to Chairman Cowsert and the full committee that be capped at 0.3 no matter what happens on the federal level. And I believe we discussed that. Is not true, Senator?
That is true, Mr. Chairman. I think the federal government's lack of action has left every state in a precarious situation, and I think the only way we can address this is by codifying here in the state of Georgia that 0.3 is our ceiling.
And the next thing that we were concerned about is to make sure that all the labs that are going to be doing this testing and then certifying that product are labs that have not just met the certifications as outlined in the bill, but also we've looked at, because we don't want some out-of-state dispensary that also has a lab altogether because they're in a whole different state we can't keep our eye on, to not have some type of a seal approval. In this case, would come from the Agriculture Commissioner.
I agree with that also.
I think that's a fair recommendation as well. Okay, I've got a question from Senator Harbison.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator. Thank you for bringing this legislation. Appreciate my colleague from Columbus. And I think you dealt with it, and I think the chairman here sort of was going along the same lines. But overall, the Fed still does not recognize the legality of any marijuana. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And number two, on line, I think you were on line 54, when you mentioned the detection of certain drugs, on line 113, I'll start there. You were saying if they found any in it, but as the chairman here was saying, 1.3 would not be illegal. It would be, you would discover whether or not it was legal based on that particular point of demarcation.
Yes, sir. The lab test would show if it exceeded that 0.3 amount.
Yeah, I meant 0.3.
Yes, sir. And at that time, the product would be seized, and the product would be, I guess, destroyed based on rules and regulations and practices established by the department.
And further, one final question, Mr. Chairman. The Agriculture Department would have the policing capabilities of carrying out this analysis, or did I miss that?
They would have the primary of going around and checking on this. This would not prohibit any other law enforcement agency in the state of Georgia from assisting them or initiating an investigation. But what we hope is if you and I had a report in Columbus that somebody was in the market of selling illegal hemp, that our agencies would be able to partner up with the Department of Ag, since they would be the ones certifying the labs, and we would be able to do a joint law enforcement action to remove this thing from the community.
Before it's distributed, a lab would take care of that under the jurisdiction of Agriculture Department.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
You, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Cowsert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the time and energy you've put into this on a short notice. We agreed it wasn't the sort of role of this subcommittee to produce a committee sub, but it certainly is to make recommendations as to how to improve your bill. I agree wholeheartedly with Chairman Albers that we want to limit this to 0.3% and not be subject to changes in the federal law. I believe that can be done at lines 52 and 3, where it specifies the Delta-9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. I think if you just delete the remainder of that sentence, you take out any reference to the federal code, because this said whichever was greater, so it allowed it to go up. Do you agree that that will do it? You've kind of probably spent a lot more time in this area than we have.
I believe if we could put Catherine on the microphone, Chairman, we had this discussion shortly before this meeting.
Chairman Cowser,
Yes.
you have the law degree and I do not. Do you think we would need to also strike at the beginning of the sentence where it says federally defined?
I've got one other option. Could we not just make it, rather than is greater, is less?
You could.
This way, if for some reason the feds ever changed it lower, then we would go lower.
Yeah. We'll work on that. As what I anticipate is that we'll have a full report to the big committee today, and depending on what people say here, Chairman, you'll kind of report the sentiments, pro and con, and the ideas, and we'll have time to prepare a committee sub before the Thursday meeting to make smart changes. If I could, one other question. I love the idea that you not be able to sell these products without the independent laboratory report from a quality laboratory, but I didn't see where there's a penalty for failing to do that. Do we make that a misdemeanor of some sort or an offense? On the part about selling to under 21, which is a vital part of your bill, we define the crime and we tell you what happens on the first offense, and the second offense is essentially a misdemeanor. But I never saw, what do you do to somebody that puts for sale in our state a product that doesn't, that violates all these rules or regulations?
Happy to answer that. I think part of the reason that it's different is because the language of selling for under 21 is written in a criminal code, and it's written in that voice. If we have products that are being sold that don't follow these guidelines, we pull them from the shelves.
Okay, you can't prosecute them for doing that.
At this time, no, but it would behoove anyone who's selling the product not to lose the batch that
Right.
they've put out there. So I think that there's a significant reason for people to comply.
Okay. And one final question.
Certainly.
Who has the law enforcement authority to prosecute kids or people that sell to kids? Is it a DA, a sheriff's department, police
Yes, sir.
department, ag department?
Well, it would be the arresting agency at this point, and the ag would have the authority to do that, but it would not prohibit any post-certified law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia, whether they were a University of Georgia police officer to a Columbus police officer, from, if they find it, same thing we do with alcohol sales and others, if they find someone selling this product to underage citizens, then they make the case.
All right. Thank you.
I want to get back to what Chairman Cowser
And
brought
that's a
up, though,
misdemeanor, Chairman, currently. Yes, sir.
for a moment. If someone is illegally selling product, certainly you can pull their stock, right, which might hurt financially. But in most areas where someone does something wrong in this state, we'll then have some type of a fine. Something happens up to the point of suspending their ability to sell. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and I don't want to muddy the water. We have thought through this, and we address it in a separate bill,
Okay, all right.
if that would suffice. Also, anyone that's selling with a COA that's inaccurate, they call it dry labbing, where they basically misrepresent what they're selling. I mean, you've got a lot of overlap with fraud at that point.
Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody who has a vested interest in this bill, what Ms. Catherine Russell said, is that if a product is sold and found to be out of compliance, not only they pull their stock, but they are working in a separate piece of legislation, not this one, to address any other fines or penalties that may go along with that.
Because
Mr. Reckler.
under the current alcohol laws, a lot of times the clerk is charged the first time, and in some cases, the business owner the second time, and there are some jurisdictions that they will attempt to remove the business license for consistent bad behavior on selling alcohol to underage citizens.
All right, we're going to, another question?
Question of Mr.
Certainly.
Russell. Catherine, there's a ability for the ag department to test some of these products, inspect them, to see if they are consistent with what their labeling says, whether they don't have contaminants and what the percentage. How's the ag department going to do that? Do you have a lab? Are you established with the capabilities of doing this type of inspection?
So we would contract with third parties, similar to how we're operating now. Currently, we have a lab that we work with where they send test samples for mini hemp that's grown in the fields, and we would continue to follow that model.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we're going to hear from a few folks here that have signed up. Quick logistics point. It's 2:33. We're going to be out of this room by a couple minutes before 3 because several people have committee meetings to go to. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people signed up. So that's going to be less than 3 minutes each. So I'd ask you to keep your comments brief and to the point. We'll start out with, I think that's Anna.